What is a press box hat trick?
It's okay, Jose. Enjoy the holidays. Go on, go skating at the ice rink. Hey guys, you think they'll sign Gus Hitting?
Patrick podcast twice already?
Could you let him celebrate? Could you please let him celebrate? John Scott.
I thought he was a bro. He is a bro. His name is The Plug. It's Alex Perez.
You know what? I'm bad with names.
I'm a host, goddammit.
I actually had one of those this year in Minnesota, and I tweeted about it. All the works.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 57 of the Press Box Hat Trick podcast. My name, of course, is Tristan, the sports online editor at the Link newspaper, and it's a solo podcast for me today. No Julian, no Vince, no Safia, and no Alex. But it's a very special edition. It's episode 57, so as we sometimes do, and I kind of want to revive this, is give shout-outs to players who wore 57 back in their day. Actually, a couple players that are still active. Shout out to David Perron of the Pittsburgh Penguins, Tyler Myers of the Winnipeg Jets, Clay Matthews of the Green Bay Packers, and also to Gary Carter, who for 1 year wore number 57 for the Montreal Expos. Now today on the podcast, a very special interview that I conducted with the founder and CEO of the Toronto Wolfpack. Now, if you don't know what the Toronto Wolfpack is, well, you're on for a treat. You will know what this is. And the reason why I say this is a special interview is because what type of team the Toronto Wolfpack will be, and what will it mean for us, not only in North America, but also in Europe, because the Toronto Wolfpack are a professional rugby team that will play in the League One, the third tier rugby league, the third tier of rugby in England. That makes the Toronto Wolfpack the first ever Transatlantic pro sports franchise. Now, is this going to pave the way for more? I know we've had, there's been a lot of rumors that the NFL and the NBA want to expand further on to where they're at right now. Is Europe a way? Is the Toronto Wolfpack going to pioneer a certain change? Now, we will talk about this and what Toronto will do inside the England setup for rugby, what their goals are, and also something that's very important for us because we are based in Montreal is what's going to happen if ever Montreal decides they want a team, and how serious this potential expansion talks would be. Now we all discussed this with Eric Perez. Without further ado, let's take a little break and we'll come back with Eric Perez, founder and CEO of the Toronto Wolfpack.
Everyone give a big warm welcome for the Toronto Wolfpack.
A Toronto-based rugby team playing in an England-based league. It's going to happen next year.
We will have a look at how this develops over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. This could go in many different directions, but at the moment, Toronto's got a jump start on everybody in North America.
Welcome back to episode 57 of the Press Box Hat Trick podcast. With you, of course, is Tristan D'Amour, and we have a very special guest today. It is my pleasure to introduce you to the founder and CEO of the world's first Transatlantic sports franchise. He's the CEO of and founder of the Toronto Wolfpack, Eric Perez. How's it going, Eric?
Great, Tristan. How are you?
I'm fine. Now, this is a really big title, Transatlantic sports franchise, the very first Transatlantic franchise. How did this come to be?
Well, that's a long story. Basically, I was living in the UK and I caught a couple of games on TV from this league called Super League, and I just fell in love with it. And I realized it was a sport called Rugby League, and I said, you know, I told myself that day in 2010 that somehow I was going to bring a franchise to Toronto for this league because I was born and raised in Toronto, and I know that it would be just fantastic. The people in Canada would love it, especially Toronto. So, a lot of talk, a lot of producing when I said I was going to produce, and basically following my dreams, and this is the end result, basically.
So I'm guessing you followed your dreams, and so you go to the league, and I'm guessing they kind of reacted in a weird way when you pitched the idea.
That's a pretty fair statement, yeah. Because they thought it was like, so the first thing I did was, actually I was invited to the House of Lords for a dinner in London, honoring, people in rugby league. So I was there, and because I had done some good stuff in the first 3 years from 2010 to 2012, building rugby league in Canada, and so they brought me over there, and that's when I first met the CEOs and the chairman of all the clubs, and I started just mingling around the room and talking to them about it. And at first they thought it was pie in the sky, but then when I, sort of explained it to them, listen, it's only a 6.5-hour flight from Toronto to Manchester. It's only a 5-hour time difference. Boston to LA is a 3-hour time difference and a 6-hour flight. So it's really not that different. And, the Celtics and the Lakers are probably one of the biggest sports rivalries in North America, and has been going since the 60s. So they've already been doing a very similar distance since the 60s. What does it matter if there's water underneath? You know what I mean? And listen, if the plane goes down, it's not a good thing whether it's water or land. So you're still making a 6-hour plane flight, so it's really not that big of a deal. And then what I did was I proved Toronto was a great rugby league market by I started the Canadian national team in the Canadian Rugby League Association, and we had games, international matches against various countries. We would get upwards of almost 8,000 per match. People plus who would air the matches on Sportsnet and Sky Sports in the UK, and we were getting very good ratings on the game, and all of that sort of came together, and they began to realize, plus my persistence and my non-stop bigging up Toronto as a city and Canada as a country, and actually one of our main goals in this thing, and one of the main selling points was that we want to expand to Montreal within 2 years after we kick off. So to get a Montreal franchise going, but and just how beautiful the North American market could be for them, and how fruitful it could be to open that up. So I was able to prove that by working hard, making it happen over here out of nothing, and then backing it up by making the right relationships and doing the right business over there. And expansion is a huge part of it too. So Montreal next, then into the States.
And we lost connection with Eric. But it's fine. We managed to call him back, and we got the interview going back again. So let's get back into it with a question on Montreal and the state of rugby in our great city. I mean, you mentioned Montreal, and of course here we're based in Montreal, and when we heard you at the office at the press conference mentioning the Montreal, we kind of for some reason we were quite surprised. What do you think makes Montreal a rugby city?
Okay, so first of all, Montreal is a sports town. Love their sports in Montreal. It's an international city, has an international flair to it. It hosts a lot of big international events, the Jazz Festival, the Formula One Grand Prix, and the one key thing is there are teams in France in this league, and so there's already a francophone component in the league. There's Toulouse, there's Perpignan. So what I see it as is nobody has a bigger rivalry with France than Quebec. So there's already two ready-made rivals. You've got your classic Toronto-Montreal rivalry, and then you've got your Montreal-France rivalry as well. So I think those could be two great rivalries. And also, listen, Montreal is a big city. It's easy to overlook that when you live in Montreal, so it's, you know it every day. It's a big city, and it's a world city. And I think that any good league in Canada has to have a team in Montreal, and we're looking for a natural rival too. And I think Montreal would be the best one out there, just because Toronto versus Montreal, that's like the eternal struggle, you know?
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair assessment. noticing that, and you were talking earlier that the difference between Boston and Los Angeles is somewhat similar to the difference that you guys are gonna have with the time difference and the traveling. Were you quite surprised that rugby was the first sport to actually try and get that thing, the transatlantic thing going on?
Don't be surprised. It was my idea. So the reason why rugby has decided to do it, rugby league has decided to do it, is because that's what I decided to do it with. So this was my idea to do, and I just, every other league is sort of. This was the last sport that could be mainstream here that wasn't, didn't have a major professional league. So I jumped at the opportunity.
So you'll play home games at Lamport Stadium, which is nicknamed the Den, on Saturday nights. Do you hold those home games as an advantage on your opposition? It's going to be played on stints of 3 weeks, I understand?
Yeah, 3 weeks or 1 month at a time. So I think, listen, the home field advantage is always an advantage. But when they come to Toronto, and there's 10,000 people in the crowd, and it's an intense atmosphere, and they're in a new place they've never been, and they just came over on Thursday, and now it's Saturday, and they're playing their game. It might be overwhelming, but they might rise to the challenge. They might even be more motivated to win. So it won't be an easy thing. These teams, a lot of these teams in this league are older than Canada, as far as older than Confederation. So they've had time to build up. Generations to build up an infrastructure. So it's never going to be easy, but yeah, it might be a slight advantage for us because we'll be there for longer times and we'll be acclimatized more. But there's always a home advantage, I think.
And so you're obviously going to be in those 3 weeks to 1 month stint in Toronto. How will It'll be kind of a unique thing where you'll be based in Toronto, but there will also be like a training facility in the UK. How is that gonna affect the team, and how is that gonna be going on the daily?
Well, you don't really know until it starts how it'll affect them. But the way it is this: when we're in the UK, we'll have our training base, which is our home there.
Yeah.
But those are still away games. We're still going to other team stadiums. The other team's fans are going to be there. It's a different field than we're used to playing on. So that's always going to be, they'll always have a slight advantage against us there. But I think our big home advantage on this is the fact that, so because we're going to be playing over there, half the games, which it doesn't really matter because, when, let's say, Montreal Canadiens, they'll play 40 games in other cities, so they'll practice in other cities and whatnot. But when they're doing that, they're practicing in a different arena every time. Whereas we're negating some of that unfamiliarity by always practicing in the same place in the UK. So even though we're on a road trip, because we're practicing at the same time, I think that's an advantage to us. At the same place in the same time is an advantage to us.
Something that I saw from the English media, so the Wolfpack will basically play in League One. I don't think I actually mentioned this, which is the third tier of English rugby. For you promotion relegation fans that are fans of soccer in North America, it's promotion relegation here in rugby as well. So maybe that's another good idea to follow the Wolfpack.
That's right.
And so I understand that the Wolfpack will be a full-time team, and teams in this league will also have, in League One, will also have part-time players. So was it the Federation's decision to put you at the lowest level? And
do you... It's okay, you have to do it that way.
Okay.
There's no way that you can start at a higher level. There's just because that's how promotion relegation works. So you have to. So, for example, I remember a time, when Leicester City, Leicester City was the champions now of the English Premier League. I remember a time when they were in League One, which is third division, right? So I remember that Leicester City from the soccer.
Yeah.
I remember when Manchester United was in the second division.
Yeah, a recent example exactly is in Scotland where Rangers had to file for bankruptcy and went down to like the fourth tier.
I'm a Rangers fan.
Oh, my bad.
I didn't want to bring it up, but the fact is they're back in the Premiership now after securing the title this year. But
well, it must give you some motivation.
That's the right way to put it. They were put down all the way to League Two, and then they had to work their way back up. But if you're a new team starting, you usually have to start in the amateur levels because it's actually we're on level 3, but it's actually a 12-level pyramid. But we go past all the amateur levels to the professional levels, and we can never be relegated below professional.
Okay. So do you expect lopsided games this season? Even though you're an expansion franchise?
Yes. Yes, I expect some lopsided games, I expect some tight games, and I expect some games that we're going to lose. It's not an easy division. I think that we'll be challenging for the title, though. And if not, definitely a playoff spot and trying to get promoted.
So, I know it's a big question for you, but where do you see the Wolfpack in 5 years? Do you see lots of promotions? Do you see where do you think the competition is going to be as tough as could be right now for the Wolfpack in the short to long term?
Within 5 years, our goal is to be in Super League, so the top division, and I think the hardest thing is going to be getting promoted from Championship to Super League. But I think that as an organization, we expect to be in Super League within 5 years, and that's the goal that we've set. And within 7-8 years, we want to be at Old Trafford in Manchester for the Super League Grand Final, representing Canada, and hopefully taking the title back to Canada for the first time. And maybe within 10 years, we could be playing Montreal in the Super League, which would be absolutely monstrous.
That would be a great thing for Canada. That would be pretty insane as well. The thought of that, actually, the thought of that is really good. Actually, I'll let all objectivity go and say that I would like to see that one day.
I like that about you, Tristan. I like it. And listen, I'll tell you one more thing. We're not going to stop at Montreal in Canada. There's other unserved sports markets like Halifax, like St. John, that actually rugby is super popular there, and it's even closer to the UK and even less of a time difference. And I think that these areas as well could be fantastic places. And I think Eastern Canada can have a couple of teams. Quebec can have a couple of teams, and Ontario can have a couple of teams within 15, 20 years. So, and that's what's been sold to the league. We're working on that objective. So, first objective, make sure Toronto's successful, show that Toronto and Canada will embrace. Next, Montreal. Then after that, Atlantic Canada, Quebec City,
But my question to this would be: would this all be in Europe within like a transatlantic kind of setup like you have, or would it be beneficial to have something specific to Canada?
Like a North American division?
Maybe.
No, it's got to be. We've got to make this the first transatlantic league. So, and also we'll be at different levels. So 15 years from now, when there's a Halifax expansion team, or 10 years from now, whatever it is, when there's a Halifax expansion team, we'll already be in Super League. Montreal will already be in Super League. They'll work their way up, and hopefully that will be their goal. And if they stay a second division team, the second division is still quite a good league, and they always have the chance to make it up. So, I see it as, and I think that it's most successful, and it's a transatlantic league, because you know what? Canada is so vast on its own. To travel from Newfoundland to BC is way farther of a flight than Toronto to Manchester, or Halifax to Manchester, Montreal to Manchester, or London. So our country in itself has the same restrictions as intercontinental travel, basically. So why limit ourselves to that, and why not make it the first Northern Hemisphere league, which is what we're trying to do here.
Eric Perez, I wish you good luck for your first season and for the building of your squad. Thank you very much for doing this, and have a great rest of your building process.
Tristan d'amour, no pun intended, but I appreciate And I look forward to the day that we're talking about a Montreal expansion team.
We'll have you back on the podcast when that happens.
Fantastic.
Welcome back to the Press Box Hat Trick Podcast, episode 57. Tristan and with you. And that was our interview with Eric Perez of the Toronto Wolfpack. Great insight to what he wants to do. Of course, it really showed to me, re-listening to the interview, what I thought at first was how much of a fighter this guy was. I mean, he really tried to get his project going, and even though it wasn't, how can I say, a more orthodox, like it was unorthodox kind of way. You need someone to pioneer in order to get the flow going. I mean, it's like when you see birds flying, you need someone to head on to make the V going, and that's the hardest spot, but someone needs to do it, and Eric Perez decided to do it. Now, I mean, the talks for a potential Montreal expansion, that was something that I was surprised to know, and to me, I feel like Eric brought some great points on the potential rivalry that could happen. I mean, some legitimate rivalries. I mean, the Montreal-Toronto rivalry in every sport. If you look at football with the Argonauts, if you look at soccer with Toronto FC and the Impact, if you look at hockey, it always kind of works because there's always kind of a rivalry going. For some reason, it gets heated, so it would work in a rugby situation. Also, he did mention that the Rugby Super League, the setup that they have in England, had French teams. So they had the teams in, I think it was Toulouse and some other cities, and with the number of French that is in Montreal, that we have a lot of French people, it would probably make a kind of rivalry as well, whereas you have the Montreal versus France, the new French against old French or something. That would probably make something interesting as well. Now, we would need someone that has enough money to, afford basically two homes. And it's something that you have to think about because the Wolfpack are going to play home games in stints of 3 to 4 weeks, and then they're going to go back to England, which is, it's safe to say, and as he said, that there is an advantage for the away team that's in Canada to have a training facility that's away from home. In a way, it's really good because you have the advantage of knowing your surroundings even when you're away from home. But these things cost a lot of money. And is someone interested to bring a rugby team to Montreal and is willing to put that much money? That's the question. Now, when he did mention the possibility and the seriousness that he saw of a potential final between Montreal and Toronto down the line, I gotta say that looked really good. As I said, I'll put my objectivity down for a second and acknowledge that would be pretty intense and that would be pretty epic. And that is pretty epic. I mean, would that be insane to have two teams from Canada come in and basically be first and second of a league, not only a sport but a league that's not from this country? That would be pretty insane. Now, is there the possibility that that something like this would happen? Eric Perez tends to think that it would. I'm still on the conservative side on it because of the troubles of bringing a professional franchise. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, how long has it been for Montreal to try to bring back the Expos? And you look over a little north of here, the Nordiques with Quebec. They have the arena, they have everything, but it's just difficult to bring a franchise here. And let's not forget that the Canadian dollar right now is not at its greatest shape. So we probably would need some kind of rich people from elsewhere, because the money isn't as big here, and especially when you're talking about England, where the pound is really, really expensive. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's 2 to 1 right now with the Canadian dollar and the pound. So that's another thing to think about. But then again, I want to wish good luck to the Toronto Wolfpack. We will be following what will be happening with the Wolfpack. We know they were forced to start from the bottom and build their way up. I mean, for all your promotion relegation advocates that are advocating for this system in North America, at least you will have this team to put your confidence in, to root for, and watch them move from the third tier up to the first tier, because that's what they want, and they have the means to do it. They have rich backers that want a team to go from the third tier to the first tier, and they're going to spend a lot more money than the teams that will be found in the third tier. They're expected to pay more than 3 times what the team what the usual teams in the third tier in League One are supposed to spend. So expect some lopsided games in Toronto, and some quick promotions. So that's always exciting. And for all the bandwagoners out there, the Toronto Wolfpack will be expected to win a bunch of their games in League One, even though they're an expansion team. So that's something to look for. Now, this brings an end to episode 57 of the Pressbox Hattrick podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I do want to remind you before we go that the podcast is also on Google Play Music Podcasts, the newest application from Google Play. They just added this feature a couple weeks ago. So look for the Pressbox Hattrick on Google Play Music Podcasts. Also, if you are on iTunes, if you're an Apple user, please subscribe to the Pressbox Hattrick podcast. If you liked this episode, please consider giving it a rating and a comment. As always, you can also find the podcast on thelinknewspaper.ca and our SoundCloud page. Now, I feel like that's a good way to find your podcast. We're pretty much everywhere that's kind of big. So we try to make our podcast as available as possible, and I think that we're getting there. We're getting there. If ever you have any comments as to where we should put our podcasts, if it's easier for you, please leave us a comment. Sorry about that. Please leave us a comment. I'm at Tristan on Twitter. Do not hesitate to tweet at me. And that brings an end to our show. Thank you very much for listening, and as always, we'll hear you all next time.